Maintaining interest. Another way to maintain interest, of course, the main idea behind all this is that you get people's attention, you maintain their interest, and then on the basis of that interest, you build the basis for the commitment to the learning experience. Various stimuli with movement, we've already talked about, with sound, which deals with tone variations and whatnot, and visual impressions. And what we mean by that is that we should be able to change the stimulus that we give people in a learning experience, in particular media, without being very disruptive, so that we don't try to focus people on the same activity constantly, okay, or for prolonged periods of time, because you get tired of it. Okay, if you don't understand what we mean by that, watch the news sometime and see how many times they change the camera, the angle on the person they're focusing on. It's not the same thing as what we're talking about here. We're talking about the medium itself, not just the technique. We need to vary how we engage people in what we're doing. Also, under maintaining interest, we have to know when to remain silent. We don't do that very well in Western cultures. We don't remain silent very often. Makes people very uncomfortable. Sit in a room with the same person for 10 minutes, looking at them in the face and not saying a word, and you'll see what I mean. What I'm talking about is not as extreme as all that. What I'm saying is that sometimes people need time to let things sink in. And when we deliver training or when we try to facilitate learning, we should allow for times like that. We can use silence as a transfer, as a bridge into something else. And also say, well, let's think about all this for a while, run through what we have done here for a minute and see how we're looking at this, and then let's see if we have any questions about it. Naturally, the one thing we do with silence is, what is it, the 1 minute of silence when somebody dies? And so what we relate to is silence with death, discomfort. You don't like to sit there and wonder what the heck is going on here. I used to have a teacher who had a problem. It was a blood circulation problem. And sometimes she would stand in front of the room saying absolutely nothing and just staring at someone. And if that was the first time you had seen this, you wondered, why is she staring at me like this? And she wasn't staring at anyone. It was a problem. It was a physical problem. And I've thought about that later on, thinking that if she hadn't done it because she was ill, she should have done it anyway. Not staring at people. It's also very uncomfortable. But silence in general. We're surrounded by noise all the time. We study with tape recorders behind us. We cook with a TV set on. Everything we do with noise. And so when somebody finally just keeps quiet, and we hear ourselves think, it's very scary. Silence is very important as a way for us to go through things in our heads, okay? to sift through things, especially if we're talking about learning. Using familiar examples, I've already mentioned that when I talked about relating experiences to what's familiar to your audience. Using comfortable surroundings. When we're talking about using comfortable surroundings, I should also point out that most experts agree that adults cannot sit in the same position for periods longer than 40 minutes. Okay? It doesn't mean that you have to stand up and cheer every 40 minutes. It means that you can sit there in the same position for 40 minutes perhaps. That's on the average. I can't do it. After about 10 minutes, I need to shift, okay, myself. But I've seen people, especially in churches, who have the ability to sit there, and I wonder how they do it. I can't do it. It interferes with learning also. Okay? So if your surroundings are uncomfortable, if your chair is uncomfortable, and you keep shifting, that interferes, okay, as well. But also, if you're trying to get people's attention to the point where they just sit there statically without doing anything, it's very uncomfortable. It interferes with learning. And define terms. That's our last point here. I've already mentioned that. People should know what you're talking about. It helps.